So listen, let's get this underway. And we're really excited how this particular mentorship has gone. The mentorship program, I think, is a really important part of what Feast is about. When we set it up, the whole idea of trying to offer our members the chance to develop their skills, either through our what we now call our learning capsule program, or more intensively through our mentorships, was really critical for us. And it's really exciting to see how the mentorship programs, both this one, as you can see, it's a large group of people, 5, is it 6? And likewise, also with our adult mentees, we've had 5 on that program. That will be coming to its climax next month. We're excitedly looking forward to that too. And it seems that interest in the mentorship programs continues to be strong. I think those of you who are involved with storytelling associations, organizations, wherever you are aware that, I think whether it's a Zoom fatigue, that the kind of general response, attendance at many of our events has been going down. I think that probably there's just so many options that are available. And so for me, it's really important that we continue to offer things that appeal to a particular niche of storytellers. So Plot Luck, our improvised group, has been going very well, and the numbers continue to grow for that. The people who come for our Just Tell, which is this very kind of informal story kind of swap session that we have, less formal than our kind of regular story swaps. These kind of things appeal to a distinct group of our membership, and we need to keep doing that in order to keep Feast strong and healthy and growing. And so, as I say, this is why for us the mentorship program is such an important part of what it is that we can offer. It's been fascinating reading on the forum, the chat, your comments, the feedback to your sessions and how they have gone. So I think for those of you who have not had that chance, or you're meeting this group for the first time during the showcase, I think you're going to have a very fascinating evening as they talk about the journey and what they've gone through. And we just like to say a huge thank you to Fran for fronting this and kind of leading them on this collaborative journey of discovery. So I don't want to say any more than to say thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's important that the storytellers have an audience to tell to, and I'm sure we're in for a good evening. So over to you, Fran.
Thank you, Roger. It's been a privilege to work since April with half a dozen storytellers spotted all around the other half of the world, even though it meant getting up at the crack of dawn here in Oklahoma. I've loved hearing the stories that they came up with and helping them learn how to coach themselves and each other, looking for ways to make their stories even more effective. And in particular, my own hobby horse is Aware, Care, Dare, taking our stories not only to inform people and make them care about the environment, but sometimes to give them models of things that they can do if they would dare. I like to begin at the beginning. Wherever I'm telling stories, I like to start by telling the story of the land and how it came to be the way it is. And a perfect example of this, in my opinion, is the story that Cara Roberts developed. She is a storyteller and environmental educator based in Northeast Scotland. And she tells stories about identity, well-being in our environment, and her story of the lonely rowan tree will take us on a long distance through time. Cara?
Thank you. I will just start with the story then, and perhaps tell you a little bit about myself afterwards. So come with me. Back through the swirling mists of time to when the memory of the ice that covered everything could still be tasted on the land. Scotland then was a bleak and barren place. Moraine, the loose sifted rock from the glaciers, covered everything and skirted up the hills on either side. This steep-sided glen was grey. But look closely at the rocks and you'll see that even here there is life. The rocks are covered in lichen, that beautiful synergy of algae and fungi. The algae photosynthesizing in the so welcome sunlight, the fungal cells breaking down and digesting the minerals. It's allowing moss to begin spreading, and simple soils are forming. And something else is stirring here too. Just a little while ago, further up the glen on a rocky outcrop, a bird landed. A waxwing, I think it was, and it left a deposit. And now something else is beginning to grow, slowly unfurling its leaves and looking very much like feathers as it does. It's a rowan tree, the first tree in the valley, and here she is, growing tall and strong and looking down over the valley at the winding river winding its way down toward the shining sea. She looks down from her vantage point and thinks, yes, this is a good place for my children to grow. And grow they do. Those first few decades are hard. There is very little soil, and soil has to be added year on year, the leaves falling, compost layering up. But soon the valley is filled with her children, and the children of all the other plants, the trees that have joined her, and a forest begins to bloom. The air hums with the noise of insects flying from plant to plant, tree to tree. Animals walk, scurry, run or jump from place to place. The rowan tree looks down from her vantage point and thinks, yes, this is a very good place to grow. Bands of wandering humans enter the glen, and they marvel at its riches, at all the plants and the animals, and from the plants they learn how to find food and medicines. From the animals they learn how to find shelter. Life is good here. The people fit with the seasons and all are content. They follow the herds of deer wandering through the forests, and soon the people begin to settle. They use the trees and the plants to build their houses out of turf and heather. They start to farm on small areas of the land and they clear the trees, but they fit with the seasons and they recognize the rowan tree and call her Brid mother of all, and she is grateful and offers them protection. In front of each house, a rowan tree is planted, a symbol of wisdom, courage, and protection. When travellers leave their homes, they take a branch from that rowan tree and tuck it into their packs, ensuring that they will make it home safely. Over time, more land is cleared for farms as the population of people begins to grow, and more people enter the glen, ones that do not know the ways of the forest, ones that have forgotten the rituals. And soon land is cleared even up on the slopes of the hills, and the hills without the trees to hold the soil together becomes unstable. The minerals leach from the soil and the crops begin to fail. Things do not grow as well as they did. People begin to leave, seeking jobs in the towns and the cities. Soon, people who have not left are cleared from the land, and sheep are brought on to graze the now coarse grasses. The deer wander lost on bare open hillsides, wondering where the trees have gone, their forests. All they have is the tough deer grass and the lonely rowan tree. She sits on her high vantage point looking down at the river winding its way down to the sea, and wonders how it came to this. But there is always hope. There is always hope and there is always change. And even though her seedlings are still bitten down, She sees them germinate, and she knows that things can change. Eventually, people begin to notice that she is still there. A tree in a landscape where trees do not grow, where they can't grow. Well, maybe they can, if they're given the help and the protection that they need. The sheep and the other browsing animals are cleared from the land, and her seedlings are allowed to flourish once more. Trees are planted to help support them, and the woodland plants that have been hiding in the soils for all these years begin to flower once more. Campion, bluebell, foxglove, and the lonely rowan tree is lonely no more. The forest blooms again, and she stands on her vantage point, looking down, offering a symbol of hope, protection for all those who would accept her gifts.
Thank you, Cara. That is beautiful. We feel the passage of the centuries and the changes for worse and for better when people see what they need to do. That's a beautiful beginning for our stories this evening. Will you tell us a bit about the work that you do?
Yes, so I began my career as a ranger working in regional and national parks, and was very involved in nature conservation and environmental education, taking people out into the environment, leading guided walks, doing storytelling as part of that as well. And that's something that I have continued all through my career, but it's become more focused on environmental education. I went into formal education, teaching geography and environmental science for a while, and now I've come back to environmental education, and storytelling has become such a big part of that for me, because it's only by the stories that we know who we are, where we're going, and how we relate to the environment as well. So for me, storytelling is really key to understanding the world. We have all these meta narratives telling us about consumerism and the political system and whatever it is. But the stories that people tell themselves and between themselves about the environment particularly, I think, are how we build relationships between ourselves and the rivers, the trees, the hills, the mountains, and so on. And that story, my local glen is known as the Glen of the Rowan Trees. But if you go up there, the hillsides are mostly bare now. There are some parcels of trees, and some of the older houses still have rowan trees planted in front of them. And people did indeed take twigs from the rowan trees whenever they went somewhere, because they have been seen as a symbol of protection for so long. There are some areas of hills that have been excluded for the sheep and the deer, and they are starting to see some regeneration, but it's a slow business. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had some really bad floods here, and one of the impacts of not having the trees on the hills are that the water just enters the watershed, enters the river basin system so much faster. And yeah, it's been interesting seeing some of the debate around that, about the fact that we need to dredge the rivers or change the course or straighten them and all the rest of it, without understanding what needs to happen on the hills in the first place. So I think stories have a huge role to play.
Your story really puts the humans into the landscape as a cooperative part of it when they understand how to do it right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we definitely are part of the environment.
Thank you, Cara. Our next storyteller is Marion Leeper. Marion says that she lives halfway up the only hill in the flat fenland city of Cambridge, UK. She generally works with youngest children and people with special learning needs. And she has been using a storytelling show, Love Stories for the Earth, to work with children under 5. She's written a book, Developing Early Math Through Stories, about using stories in education. And she's going to educate us today about how the plants came to Earth. So this is another origin story, but this is from far away. Will you tell us, Marion?
Yes, and this story is from Tibet. Oh, excuse me. And I love these pourquoi, these creation stories, because of the questions they raise. In Tibet, they say that at the beginning of time, it was Buddha that fixed the depth of the ocean and traced the path of the Milky Way. And it was Buddha that put all the animals, the creatures, the people, placed perfectly balanced around the earth. And so you can imagine when he'd finished, he was tired. He sat under his favorite tree in the gardens of heaven, and he was just drifting off for a nap when a great cry from the earth, "Buddha, we're hungry!" He'd forgotten the food. So he called all his friends from the gardens of heaven and he explained his problem. And some say it was the beautiful Bodhisattva Guanyin who came up with an idea. We will make presents, gifts for the creatures and people of earth so that they may be fed. Everyone got to work making and shaping and folding and wrapping, and soon the first parcels were ready. Look, Buddha, said somebody, look at these little parcels. If you put them in the earth, they will unwrap and grow into fine heads of wheat. Got a little head of wheat, a bit old, just here. And Buddha smiled and he nodded. And he brought out a basket. Here. Put those little parcels in the basket, just here, on the right-hand side. And other people had brought. There was barley. And beans. And all of those went into the basket. And then it was the turn of the goddess, the Bodhisattva Guanyin. She was quite excited. Look what I've got. It's so green. It's so spiky. And everyone went, ugh, Guanyin, get it away from us. That's a stinging nettle. It's a weed. Guanyin said, but butterflies like it. And it's quite nice in soup. And Buddha, he smiled and nodded. Guanyin, put it here on the left-hand side of the basket, because it's good to have all kinds of plants. And it turned out that other people had made plants that people would call weeds, bright, riotous, rampaging plants. Like poppies. They went in. And thistles. Whoa, they floated down. Look at those. All of them floating into that basket. And soon the basket was full. Who's going to take the basket to the earth? Said Buddha. Everybody waited for Buddha to put them, and then a voice from right over at the gates of the garden. Me, I'm going to do it. It was General Yak. General Yak, the chief of all the forces of the armies of heaven. General Yak, with his padded armour all embroidered with gold and silk. General Yak with his great helmet of enormous horns on each side. But I need to tell you about General Yak. He had a secret. General Yak's hands are little thumbs. If ever he tries to make something, it all goes wrong. And he's worried that people will laugh at him, which is why he shouts. Buddha, he smiled And he nodded and he said, good. General Yak, take the basket to the earth. And when you get there, put in your right hand and spread 10 handfuls of the good grain. And then put in your left hand and spread 1 handful, the wild, colourful plants. But when General Yak got to earth and thought, now, 10 handfuls with the right hand, which is my right hand? Couldn't work it out. And he got it wrong. He spread 10 handfuls of the wild weeds and 1 handful of the good grain. And he went round the earth and up and down. And when he got back to where he started, then he realized his mistake. What shall I do? Am I going to get out of this? What shall I tell Buddha? In the end, he went back. He knelt in front of Buddha. He took his great helmet off and put it at Buddha's feet, and he said, Buddha, I've made a mistake. And he explained what he'd done. And Buddha smiled. You made a mistake, General Yak. What are you going to do to put it right? General Yak said, I'll go to Earth. I'll go to Earth and I'll help the people clear enough space that the good grain will grow. And Buddha, he picked up that helmet and he put it back on General Yak's head. He said, General Yak, you deserve that helmet. Because at Earth, when you get to Earth, the people of Earth will treat you like a brother. They will garland you with flowers. So much will they love the help you give them. And that's how it is from that day to this. Far up in the valleys of Tibet, too high for any machine or tractor to reach, the yak still helps the people farm the land and plough the earth. And from that day to this, when Buddha walks around the earth, when he sees a cloud of butterflies hovering over a patch of nettles, he smiles and he nods.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you. Every gardener will appreciate the 10-to-1 ratio of wild self-seeding things to the things that we're trying to grow. We appreciate the different plants that you have brought together to demonstrate this. I know when you're working with young children or children who are unfamiliar with the topic, it's so important to have the visual aids to be sure everyone understands what you're working with. Can you tell us a bit about your work with small children and special needs audiences?
So yes, this story I was designed to tell with very little children. And I think the main difference about telling it to children, it's about twice the length because the children like to talk. And it's so interesting. I told this story as an aware story to teach them, well, more to raise questions about plants and biodiversity and what kind of plants we should be growing and caring for. And it turns out that pretty much every child I've ever met recognizes a stinging nettle. And they tend to know quite a lot about weeds, and quite a lot of them know that usually it's good to have different kinds of plants. But what they're interested in this story is the moral dilemmas. And they get very excited about what General Yak should do and whether he could lie to Buddha or make an excuse, or whether he should tell the truth. And they all go, no, he's got to tell the truth. Everything can be fixed if you tell the truth. And it kind of made me think, well, maybe this story isn't working because it's not doing what I thought it was doing. It's not teaching them about plants, but about justice. And then I realized, of course, that in talking about environment and climate change is talking about justice. And so that I learned something quite profound from the children about that.
Oh, that's wonderful, Marion. Thank you. I think most of the pourquoi stories are not intended to be scientifically accurate. They are stories about human behavior, but this is an opportunity to do that. And also, I'm sure they will remember your examples of the crops and the wild plants. Thank you so much, Marion.
Thank you.
Our next storyteller comes to us from Australia by way of, I think, Singapore from India. She will introduce herself, Priti Modyiyer.
Hi there, everyone. Give me 1 second. I need to share my screen. Thanks, Fran. So, hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to see everyone, to see all of you today. And I'm delighted, that you could all make it. Very supportive and very scary, but very supportive. So, I moved to Australia very recently. It's not even been a year yet. And I'll tell you more about myself, but this is, I will waffle a little bit, so bear with me. And when I moved here, Fran had this question in the mentorship. So what are the current problems in the land that you are in, and what are you going to do about it? And what stories would you like? Not, what you're going to do about it. What stories are you going to tell about them? And I was wondering, did I even have the space and time, that this lovely opportunity deserved? But I'm very glad that I did jump in. Because all of the lovely people in my mentee group and Fran made the process so much fun and so subtle and so wonderful that I have found that I am a changed person. I'm a better person. And I wouldn't have been a better person had I not been with these wonderful people for these past few months. This conversation, I'm not going to tell a story today, though I did tell a lot of stories in the mentorship, and I have some lovely eco stories now to share. But today I'm going to have a conversation with you. It's an attempt to share with you this journey that we started with the mentorship, and I trust it's going to continue much after the showcase. And when I take you along this winding path, bear with me. I promise, I really promise, I have a point and I will get to it eventually. Okay. So I just told you I moved to Australia and I visited the Blue Mountains. And the Blue Mountains are a range of mountains on the west of Australia. Steep cliffs. Those are the three sisters you can see in the background. The eucalyptus forests. It's a beautiful place. Now, these mountains are called the Blue Mountains because of the blue haze that surrounds them. The eucalyptus trees emit oil droplets, and these combined with dust particles and water vapor, they scatter short wavelength rays of light, and those are predominantly blue, and that's why they are Blue Mountains. Now, when you go back to India, the Nilgiri are also Blue Mountains. Nil meaning blue, Giri meaning mountains. They call them hills, but trust me, everything is over 2,000 feet. They're proper mountains. And they are beautiful. Now, these mountains get their name from the Nilkurinji flowers that cover this land in a lavender blue color once in 12 years. And you might be forgiven that if you thought that they were blue because of the sheer number of eucalyptus trees that do the same thing that they do in their native Australia. The eucalyptus is so predominant and on these slopes that with the tea plantations that you'd really think that even the eucalyptus trees are now called Nilgiri trees, though the real name is Tel Patra, or leaves with oil, or Sugandha Patra, meaning fragrant leaves. Now, all of you would know the eucalyptus is an amazing tree. Its oil is a natural insect repellent. It has a bunch of medicinal properties. I've used eucalyptus to relieve pain and cold and flu-like symptoms, and it smells so good. I've made this fabulous concoction for my aunt's niece that she swears by. It chases mosquitoes away when you put it in your mop water, a couple of drops. The wood's good for paper and pulp. It's a fabulous tree. So this eucalyptus tree was brought to India in 1970. And then in the 1900s, the British were, they saw these large treeless expanses on the hills. And these were the Nilgiri Mountains, the Palani Hills, and the Anamalais. These are the three mountain ranges in the south of India. So they thought that this was all, wasteland, and decided, oh, let's make this productive. And so they imported trees that would drain the marshes and give them revenue from timber. And these trees, wait for it, were imported from Australia, the eucalyptus. Of course, they imported wattle and some pine, but let's just focus on the eucalyptus for today. And that's how the eucalyptus continued and became so much a part of the landscape that most people can't even remember the time when they did not cover these mountains. So I just told you I moved to Australia, right, at the beginning of the year. And for the first time ever, I have a garden. So a garden is a commitment, as anyone who has one knows. It says you're going to be there for a certain while. And so I began to look around the garden. I learned how to rake. I practiced blowing leaves out of my driveway because I got tired of raking. And then I fell in love with the clover lawns. Those beautiful, crazy seeds that Marion spoke about, they filled my lawn with dandelions and daisies and clover. So pretty, much prettier than plain grass. I have a folktale about that. And I watched over plants as they went to sleep for the winter. And now they're alive again as spring is in the air. My liliums, thank you God, are still alive. I was so sure I had killed them because I saw them wilt and turn brown the moment, the winter comes. I also got a tulsi or a holy basil plant. That still looks like twigs, so I might need a new one. The reason I got a tulsi and was gifted a curry plant is because these plants are really important in any Indian household. And then someone told me that neem trees were common in Australian gardens. So now you must know this, that neem trees are welcome in any Indian garden because they are beautiful. The neem is an amazing tree. Its oil is a natural insect repellent. It has a bunch of medicinal properties. I've used neem for everything. I've used it to spray my plants to get rid of the aphids or, the white fly. You can take a neem twig, not so much like the rowan twig, but yeah, and you can take a twig and chew it and use the bristles as a toothbrush. Then after you've spit out the astringent juice, your mouth is super clean and the water, sweet. You can boil the leaves and use the water to heal dandruff. You can make amazing hair oil. It's supposed to keep your hair dark. It's a blood purifier. It's got, the list is endless. The amount of Ayurvedic remedies you can create is really well documented. It is a fabulous tree. The neem was brought to Australia for the same properties, but now it has escaped cultivation and grows wild on the banks of the rivers in northern Queensland. And it is widely planted as a shade tree. Everybody loves it. The Australians love it. It is beautiful. It is beloved of gardeners, and you will find nursery plants in weekend markets. And so I thought, should I be getting a tiny neem tree for my garden? A teeny tiny one to begin with in a pot? And now, you see, this is how I have changed. That began the beginning of my slide down the eco-mentorship rabbit hole. I found out that the neem has been classified as a weed. A weed is something that does something you don't necessarily want it to do where you don't want it to do it. A rose bush, I'm quoting Fran here, a rose bush in a cornfield is a weed, and a cornstalk in your garden is a weed. When I heard that, I was like, neem, a weed? This valuable, precious, precious plant that, they say that in that Indian house, if you have a neem tree in your backyard, that will always be happy. But it is. And gardeners have strict instructions to limit its spread. You can have a neem tree, but you must pull up saplings. You must chop down and burn other extra mature plants, including the roots. And you have to prevent the seed spreading, whether they do it with the bats, the birds, or the humans. And no general, to do it for you. Not allowed. You see, Australia has a delicate ecological system. And though the neem isn't a big danger yet, it's not. There you go. It's growing at the base of a eucalyptus in northern Queensland. It could be. We don't know how it's going to affect the land, the flora, and the fauna, so they take care of it. And why am I telling you all this? Because you see, the eucalyptus back home in India, now that is a pest too. It's a big, big problem. So the reason it becomes a problem, as I found out in my little deeper in the rabbit hole, is that these mountains, the Palanis, the Nilgiris, and the Anamalais, they support a unique shola forest grassland ecosystem. There are grass-covered hills that are very similar to the Scottish Highlands. And you can see in the picture, this side, is the valleys where there are forests, and the rest, the slopes, are all grassland. Unique species of songbirds, and don't even get me started on the plants. There are more than 70 rare and threatened plants only on one of these mountains. Long story short, there are species, flora and avifauna, that are found nowhere else, and they have evolved over millennia. The eucalyptus, first so prized for the timber, the oil, and their fast-growing nature, is now sucking up precious water, creating water shortages, destroying the very grassland that makes the Nilgiris the Blue Mountains. And cutting them is not going to make it okay. Because if you can see in this picture, the shorter trees at the bottom, those are the shola trees. They will become invasive and take over the grassland, and that will be impossible to replace. So why is this grassland so important? Because of a weed, you see. The Neel Kurinji flower that I spoke about, that blooms only once in 12 years. It paints the mountains lavender blue, and it has so many benefits. I'm surprised that people haven't found it yet. The list is endless. Respiratory inflammation, stomach ailments, rheumatism, bacterial, viral, antifungal, anti-diabetic, anti-cancer, anti-arthritic, anti-inflammatory. And it only grows here. So it blooms for 30 days, and by a process called masting, we'll talk about it later, spreads its seeds, and it is gone. You can't even see where the plant was. And if you pluck it before the seeds are spread, there will be no Neel Kurinji flower 12 years later. And you wouldn't even know that you've done that. And
Thank
so
you.
now today I ask you, in all that we've spoken about, in all my running around, what is the real weed or the real invasive species? Was it the neem with the needed insecticide and unpredictable effects that it has on Australia's native ecosystem? The eucalyptus, those fabulous medicinal properties and water-sucking menaces? The Neel Kurinji, that one might be forgiven and knowing that they exist if you miss the blooming? The shola forest, that they were endemic and always there? Or something else entirely?
Thank you. Thank you. I think we've learned a lot, both about Australia and about India, and perhaps about human intervention as an invasive function as well. Thank you, Priti. Can you tell us briefly, where will you tell this story in Australia? Will you have a chance to
So
tell it?
I'm hoping to build a little bit more and not make it so much like a National Geographic Channel. But I thought the purpose of this showcase, it was all right because we are all interested in the same thing. But yeah, I intend to use that in conjunction with a couple of the other folk tales that everyone else has heard, the neem and tamarind, and the other, how the tamarind got its serrated leaves. So I intend to make a 3 or 4 series of folk tales and use it as a program for that.
Oh, that'll be wonderful. That'll be a whole program about trees, really.
Yes.
You have Arbor Day in Australia?
I'm not quite sure yet. I'll have to defer to one of the Australians and ask.
Very good. Well, thank you, Priti. Our next storyteller, back to the UK, Cassandra Wye, lives in Bristol, I believe, but she has traveled the world teaching and telling tales for over 30 years. I believe we met in Singapore, is that right?
We do.
And she works a great deal in Southeast Asia, but back home in Bristol, Cassandra will tell us a story from Borneo.
Thank you, Fran. Welcome, everybody. This is just that's it. Can we just pin the video? That would be great. Thank you. Okay, thank you. This is a story that comes, Fran, from the island that used to be called Borneo. It actually was Borneo as a colonial term, and it's not tended to be used nowadays. As a storyteller, I have been telling stories for 30 years around the world. And my lifelong focus as a storyteller is about the relationship between people, the people and their land, what it means to them to belong to that land, and how they feel about that land. Only a feeling that only they have and only they can talk about. But sometimes as storytellers, if we are lucky, we can find a way too to put that feeling into words so that the people and the land and the story can live on. I want you to imagine an island on the edge of the South China Sea. And at the northernmost tip of that island, there is a town called Sandakan. And Sandakan is a beautiful town with a beach that stretches for mile upon mile. And the beach is lined with tree after tree after tree, coconut trees. And people come and sit under those trees and they chit and chat and relax. And Sandakan is indeed a beautiful town. But once it was golden. For long ago, before Sandakan became a town, when it was just a small village, there was no tree-lined beaches, no. They just had one circle of trees, a grove. And in the center, in the middle, in the midst of that grove, there was one tree that grew so tall, it seemed to touch the sky. And its leaves, its fronds spread so wide, they seemed to encircle the sun. And the sun, when it came down to rest each and every night, the golden light of the sun would touch the leaves of that tree, and they would glow golden. And then the light would spread not just to the leaves, but the branches, the bark, even the roots itself, where they lay visible above the ground. They too glowed golden. And that golden glow, well, it called everyone to stop what they were doing and gather together in the shade of that tree. And the elders would sit and relax and chit and chat and talk their worries away. And the children would nestle with their backs against the bark, and they'd fall asleep, nestled in the roots of the tree, falling asleep to the sound of their parents' laughter. And the glow of that tree, well, it seemed to the people of Sandakan that the glow of that tree filled them too. It was as if they too glowed golden, golden with content. And word spread of this golden tree and golden village, and the word spread from village to village, from town to town, until the word went out to sea, to the pirates who lay waiting. And the pirates heard about this golden tree and golden town, and they wanted the gold for themselves. So they waited until one day a sea mist covered them from view, and they sailed as close as they dared into the bay of Sandakan. And then slipping overboard into their small boats, they rowed towards the shore. And they rowed so softly, their blades barely touched the ocean, and they made not a single sound. And slowly, silently, they came to land, and slowly, silently, they crept out of their boats and up the shore, closer and closer and closer, until they ran, and screaming at the top of their voices, they ran into the village. And the village heard their screams and came out, wondering what was happening, and they were cut down where they lay on the ground, young and old together. And then the pirates searched for their gold, the gold they'd heard so much of, the gold that didn't exist, the gold they could never understand. And when they did not find the gold, they burned the houses down and razed them to the ground. And then in silence they left. And in silence, the few who were left came back to the village. The elders shaking with shock. The parents desperately looking for their children. The children sat numb, still holding the hands of their loved ones who had gone. Slowly, they gathered together under the shade of their golden tree. "This tree is evil," said one of the elders. "It brought the pirates to us. We must cut it down." "No," said one of the children. "Please, don't do that. This tree is all I have left of my mother. You remember we used to sit together under the shade of that tree. Please don't cut it down. It's all I have left of her. Please." But the elders would not listen. They took their knives and they cut. And with the first cut, there was a moan. And with the second cut, there was a cry. And with the third cut, there was a scream of pain so loud. Whether it came from the children or the tree, I do not know. But the scream filled the air. And then it was gone, like the tree. And silence remained. And in time, the villagers rebuilt their village. In time, they replanted their trees, not in a circle, no. They planted them in a line along the beach. And the memory of that golden tree and of what they once were was lost, except for those children who remembered the golden tree and what it meant to them. They passed the story on to their children and their children's children, so that the story, the memory, and the tree, which meant so much to them, would live on. And all of that is so long ago now. Sandakan is now a thriving, beautiful town, and people come from miles around. But once it was golden.
Thank you, Cassandra. Tell us, how will you use this story in environmental storytelling?
Well, Fran, I don't know because it's the first time I've told it, so we shall see. But for me, the reason why I wanted to tell it here is over the months that we have been meeting, I've been thinking, what is my work? What does that mean to me as an eco-storyteller? And it has always been, since the age of 7, about what is lost, but also rebuilding and making the most of what remains. So when we were children, helping to rebuild in the middle of a forest, in a wasteland, in a quarry, to making a wetland, a nature reserve for all the children around. From growing up to working in community city farms that have been built by the community and the bomb sites, to now being part of a community garden that is made from an old tennis court. A places where everyone is welcome. Mm-hmm. I'm not a storyteller who tends to go to the beautiful places. As a disabled person, I can't often get in them. But I like to work in places where everyone was welcome. And we build them together out of what we have, out of what remains.
I feel that your description of the village after the pirates' rampage was very poignantly timely as we look at what's happening in the Middle East and the way that people are feeling. Also, the news from Acapulco, where the extraordinary hurricane has blasted through and destroyed people's livelihood, and it's not just pirates that cause this kind of disruption and cause people to look around them and wonder how they're going to rebuild. Well, thank you, Cassandra, for your story of the golden tree. Our next storyteller, also in UK, but at least Scotland for the time being, is in UK. Lindsey Gibb is based in Scotland. She says, where the Highlands meet the Lowlands, but she's currently not exactly camping, but she's up at a storytelling festival in the Orkney Islands. Is that right? That's pretty far north of Scotland. Oh boy, it must be getting cold there already. She has worked in environmental and climate storytelling for years and mostly tells outdoors. And it's wonderful to be able to tell in the land where the stories happen. She also works with scientists to blend stories and science together, and even works with CEOs and board members to understand the impact of their operations on the environment. And we are looking forward to hearing her tell a very old story, told the way a naturalist will tell it.
Thank you, Fran, and hello everybody. As Fran said, I'm not at home. Normally I live in Perthshire and have the Highlands out one window and the Lowlands out the other. But today I'm up for the next few days up in the far north in the Orkney Islands. It is what we call blowing a hoolie up here at the moment, which means the internet's a little bit dodgy. So I'm really hoping that it can stay with us just for the rest of this story. So, and as Fran says, it's a very old story. This is my take on one of Aesop's fables. It was a gorgeous, warm spring day, and Cricket shook himself and then went to climb the tallest grass that he could find. And once he got there, he sang his heart out, rubbing his legs, telling the world that he was the best cricket on the tallest piece of grass. And wasn't it lovely and warm? And Cricket spent all day, every day, up the top of the tallest piece of grass, telling everyone that he was the best cricket on the tallest piece of grass. But he would notice that while he was up on his grass, every day, down on the ground, he would see coming out a hole would be some ants marching along side by side. And they would go out with nothing, and when they came back, they would all be bringing something, some form of food. And this happened day after day, until eventually Cricket couldn't help himself and called down, "Ants, ants, what are you doing? Why are you working so hard? Why don't you just enjoy this lovely warmth?" And one of the ants stopped and looked up and said, "Cricket, we're preparing for winter." "Winter?" said Cricket. "What is winter? I've never heard of winter." "Well, winter is when it gets cold and dark and there's not much food to find, so we go and get our food now and store it up ready for winter." said Cricket. "It's cold and dark, not having any food? Don't be ridiculous. Look around you, it's warm and there's plenty of food to be had. No, there's no winter." And so the days passed and the ants went out and back and out and back, bringing more food, and Cricket stood at the top of his grass, singing his song, tell everyone that he was the best because he was at the top of the tallest grass. And once again, Cricket called down to ants, "Ants, ants, you're missing this lovely warmth, yet you're working back and forward, working so hard. Just relax and enjoy." "But Cricket, we're getting ready for winter. It will get cold soon. It will get dark." "Oh," said Cricket, "no, look at it. It's warm and there's plenty of light." And so the ants carried on their journeys back and forward, and Cricket stood at the top of his grass singing his song. And then a strange thing happened. Cricket noticed that maybe it was getting a bit darker. Or perhaps he was just singing and not noticing. But the ants were working harder, coming back and forward even more. And then Cricket noticed it was getting a bit colder, and the more ants worked even harder. But Cricket still stood at the top of his tallest piece of grass, singing his song, because he was the best cricket there was. And then one day, the ants didn't come out the hole in their ground, nor the next. In fact, Cricket didn't see the ants. But it began to get darker and colder. And then something strange happened. Something came out the sky and fell to the ground. This wasn't the normal wet that Cricket was used to. It was soft and white. And in fact, the whole ground became white, and then the white got bigger and bigger until it reached Cricket. And Cricket got colder and colder and colder until he couldn't get cold any longer, for Cricket passed to the next world. Well, the sun carried on its transit, and once again it came round, and the land began to warm, and the white began to disappear. And then that little hole in the ground reappeared, and the ants once again came marching out. And there they found Cricket, his body still clinging to that tall piece of grass. And they took his body, and they took it deep underground to their food stores, where they would help, where his body would help the ants see through another dark, cold time. And the ants again went walking out and back, preparing for the next winter.
Thank you. This is not the Disney version where the ants invited the cricket to come underground and serenade them through the winter.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
I think we...
Sorry, there's a little...
I think
there's a wee delay going on between us and Fran. Sorry.
Yeah. When you're up in the Orkney Islands, you feel very fortunate to have internet at all, I suppose. My goodness.
Oh, it's not that bad. It's just because it's very windy. So Fran had asked me to talk a little bit about how I use stories and storytelling. So just to try and stop us interrupting each other, it's probably easier if I crack on. I've been using storytelling in environmental work for a very, very long time, in lots of different ways. I used to start out focusing mostly around the conservation side, and latterly I've moved more into climate stories. And that story is one I use regularly as a talking point to get people discussing climate themes. And what's the beautiful thing about stories is, of course, it's not about anybody in the room, is it? You can all talk about the characters and say what you think, and nobody's right and nobody's wrong. So it's a great way to start a discussion. And I particularly do this kind of work in very informal settings, like in a cafe or a pub, where everybody's got their cup of tea or a bit of cake, and you can just relax and enjoy a story and then talk about the story. And it's a fantastic way to get conversation going, but also to hear all the different ways that people interpret the story and how they see it. So Cricket's body getting harvested was somebody saying to me, I thought there was going to, that's the circular economy. And I went, mm-hmm. So it's grown and developed from people's input. I also, as Fran said, I work with scientists. I've got various things going. I've worked with scientists for years in two ways, partly working with them to tell the world what they're doing, but in a way that most people can understand. But also working with the scientists so that they can actually present their own stuff in a way that people understand, because, if you're not a scientist, you don't always understand it. But I also do something called Stories in Science, where I tell stories and then the scientists talk about the scientific aspects of it. And then we use that as an opportunity to talk about other aspects as well. And believe it or not, I do use storytelling with everybody, actually, but I work a lot with senior directors and CEOs on climate change and getting them to make change within their own business. And I use stories all the time. It might not be folklore, it might be a story of what somebody else does, but that is a technique I use all the time. So it's all the way through. So when the ECO-mentorship came up, it was like, I wonder what I can learn. And I learned all about aware care there, and that's been a huge development for me. That's been really helpful.
Well, if anything, it mainly just helped you recognize you were doing it already, I think.
I'm not sure I was daring enough. I want to be more daring.
Well, as we all know, Aesop was an African slave in Greece, and so he did not say, "And now, you stupid people, here's the moral of the story," because he wouldn't have told any more stories at that point. But we, I think, have all recognized that this story is a wonderful fable for climate change deniers who are saying, "Oh, no, it couldn't be that the world is getting warmer because look, here's a snowball." Luckily, that senator is no longer representing me in Oklahoma, but Senator Snowball, we call him. This is one.
I've had a similar discussion.
One way that the fables can be used as political cartoons to dramatize how people react to things. Thank you, Lindsey, for your poignant telling of that story, evocative telling, and for telling us about the work that you do. Very important work. Our last storyteller comes to us from Slovenia, which is, I had to look it up, I'm afraid, is between Austria and Croatia in Southeast Europe. Spela Kaplja is a storyteller, a writer, and environmentalist. And she uses stories to inspire children and adults to connect to nature and find ways to rewild their lifestyles toward a more sustainable way of living. She has often worked at summer camps, summer nature camps. She trains teachers and nature guides and about ways to use stories to educate about nature. And she will be, well, we'll tell you afterward about what she's going to be doing in the Canary Islands later. But this is a story that owes its origin, I believe, to one of those summer camps, and she'll tell us about it.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Yes, the story that I'm going to tell you comes from a 12-year-old girl called Brina Cerlini, and she wrote it on one of our summer camps that we have for children. And of course, I have her full permission to tell the story, and I'm really happy to do it. So if you would dive with me down deep into the ocean. And let's go. Once upon a time, and I hope still, down, down, down beneath the surface of the ocean, down deep, was a village. Village filled with houses, beautiful, colorful houses made out of shells and pebbles. And this was a home of the ocean people. Ocean people, they were different to the land people in terms of they had fins instead of legs, and they had pointed ears. There was one thing I have to tell you that was most important in that village and in the whole ocean. It was the song of the ocean. That song was, I think, like a breath or like the manna. It was feeding all the creatures of the ocean together with the ocean people, and it was connecting them all together. And you could hear the song all day long and all night long. And in that village lived a little girl. One morning, she woke up. And there was this strange, deafening feeling in her body. And she was worried, have I gone deaf? She was thinking. And then she started to clap the furniture. And as the noise came out, she was like, okay, I'm okay. But still, there was this deafening, unusual silence. So she ran down the stairs, looked out of the window, and saw the whole village in confusion, ocean people running around, being scared. She opened the door, and it hit her. The silence hit her. There was no song. The song was gone. There was no song. And in the next minute, she already saw her friend, her best friend, Dolphin, swimming toward her. And from the floor, the sea urchin came climbing up her fins and up her body and sitting on her shoulder. What do we do, friends? Little girl thought for a second. Coventina, she said. Coventina was her grandmother, the wise old woman that lived nearby in a cave. Let's go there. She will know the answer. So they swam as fast as they could. I mean, sea urchin was still sitting on the shoulder, just holding tight. And they swam. And when the girl entered the cave, she already saw her beautiful grandmother Coventina sitting in her chair in a beautiful golden dress. And she seemed so peaceful, and she seemed as if she would be already expecting her. So the little girl ran towards her and fell in front of her legs and put her head like on her lap, on her legs, and just waited. And the wise grandmother started to speak. You know, she said, the land people, they are treating the ocean badly. With all the noise pollution, with all the plastic pollution, with all the hunting and all the other things going on, the ocean is suffering too bad. And that's why the song is gone. There was a silence. And then the little girl looked up with her eyes big, searching for hope. And there was hope to be found, in the words of her grandmother. She started to speak, as if she would be telling a story. And she said, you know, thousands of years ago, there was a mighty wizard, and he had foreseen the fate of the ocean. So he made a spell, a really, really strong spell that would save the ocean when the time comes. The girl was listening with her pointed ears in full attention. And then the grandmother continued, and she said, he also hid it in a special cave called Cave of the Secrets. And he made a map. And at that point, she reached at the shelf and took down a paper, unfolded it in front of the girl's eyes, and just waited. And the girl was looking, and her eyes were getting bigger and bigger, like glittering. And at one point she said, oh, look, grandmother, there is the cave. And the grandmother laughed and said, yes, I knew it. What? And she said, the wizard knew that only the one who will be able to read the map will be able to save the ocean. So it is you, my little girl. It is you to save the ocean. And the girl started to tremble a little bit. I mean, this duty was a bit heavy for her young little body, but it only lasted for a second or two, because then she remembered how much she loved the ocean. And she kissed her grandmother goodbye and left. Again, with her two friends, she was swimming north, because this is the direction that the map was showing. And they were swimming until they reached this giant, big, rocky wall. And they were a bit confused, because this was surely the way that the map was saying that the cave is. First, they tried to find a way in with force, but of course they couldn't. It was heavy, it was hard. And then the little sea urchin on her ear said, look, 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 there's something. There is a den in the rock. Look at it. And the little girl looked, and she saw a symbol that was similar to the one she saw on the map. And so she put her palm on it, and as if by magic, the big wall opened. And now they were already swimming towards the cave. It was like an entrance, like a big, big, big open entrance towards the cave. So they were swimming slowly. And at one point, there was another obstacle. There was a huge school of fish, which seemed not only as if they are protecting something, but they also seemed like they are hungry. So this time the dolphin was the one solving the solution. And he said, like, hey, but don't you have some, you had some food before, something, maybe just give it to me and I have an idea. So a little girl took it out of her pocket and gave it to him, and he swam away with it. And a whole school of fish followed the dolphin, up, up, up. The girl was looking. The school of fish was getting smaller. Her friend was getting smaller. But then at some point, she saw something else in the distance, and it looked like a net. And no, she said, no, be careful, don't go. But even before she was able to finish the sentence, she saw her friend being pulled away. And she was broken. She was broken. She couldn't even move. She just stand there. And then a little voice came, hey, but we have to go on. We have to go on. This mission is really important. It was a sea urchin encouraging her. So again, in front of them, there was this rocky entrance. And again, she had to put her palm on the den, and the rock opened. And there it was, this beautiful cave of secrets. It was the actual heart of the cave of the secrets, all glittering in red and greenish light. So beautiful it was. But as the girl entered, she couldn't find the real strength to do anything. She saw there was a chest in the right corner, but she was like paralyzed of the grief she couldn't fail. That lasted for a while, and then there came a voice. I think it was a voice of the cave. It was similar to the grandmother Coventina's, actually. And it said, little girl, feel the pain. Feel it. And she listened, and she trusted. And she felt the pain of her friend being lost, and maybe he will never see him again. And the tears were running down her cheeks. But she felt it still, in her tiny body, with her big heart. And then the pain got even bigger. It was the grief for the ocean being so devastated. It was the grief for the song being lost. And her tears were becoming even more and more. And there was a moment. Was it a laughter? Yes, it was a laughter. It was a memory of how she first met her friend Dolphin, and it was the laughter that she heard from him. And that memory was the one lighting up the darkness and giving her the strength to reach for the chest and to open it with all the strength that she had. And in that moment, the song came out. It was the song of the ocean, but this time it was even more potent and strong because of the spell that the wizard put on. And this time it had a power to reach beyond the surface. So it went beyond, up there where the land people are living. And they were all doing their different things, doing their jobs, walking around. When all of them, in one moment, in their hearts, they heard the song. And they were drawn to the ocean like magnets. And they all stood at the shore, looking at the ocean. And each of them remembered how they lived their life, how they use too much, how they pollute, how their lives are not sustainable. And each of them remembered and knew for sure how this is affecting the ocean. And each of them made a small decision of their own, and they started to change their lives. And they started also to connect to the ocean again. So that was good. And down deep, at the bottom of the ocean, the girl was happy and she was swimming out of the cave when she saw something coming, swimming towards her. It was her friend Dolphin. Okay, with a big scratch on his face, but okay, and alive. So they hugged and hugged and hugged, and then together, of course, still with the little friend on their shoulder, they swam back to the village. And people were already dancing there and celebrating and being really happy that the song is back. And ever since then, and I hope that today still, the song is alive, waiting for all of us to open our hearts and hear it. It might change us, but this is what we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Spela. Thank you. I love the way the memory of the laughter of friendship inspired the girl to have the strength to do what needed to be done. We tell stories, we hear stories of devastation, of loss, and how can we persevere with that burden of darkness on us? But the memory of joy and the song that the ocean sings, we can hope will inspire people to, as you say, the land people change their way of living.
Yeah, I would just maybe like to tell a little detail just for the end of the story. So I've already told you that the story was written by a 12-year-old girl, and she was inspired at one of our camps and wrote it and told it, of course, to the others too. And no one knew. 1 year passed. So there was another summer camp, and another girl came with a big pack of papers. I think it was a red string even on top of it. And she just handed it to Brina, to the girl that wrote the story, and said, here it is. Those are the illustrations for your story. And me and my two friends, we are working together here at the center. We were so inspired and so touched by that we decided that we will find the funds and money to make this book happen and to make it alive. So actually, I was just going to show it to you, because now we have it. Now this is the book that we published. And I think that it brings the inspiration of how stories can connect. So,
that's beautiful. And you're still working with the ocean and with the dolphins. Can you tell us about what you'll be doing in Tenerife, in the Canary Islands?
Yes, gladly. Last year it was the first time, and it was a beautiful experience. So it was we called it Earth Week, and it was devoted to dolphins and the whales, especially to dolphins, because in the time of when we were there, so this is April, end of April, it is the time when mother dolphins come in the bay with the little calves, and they stay there. So what we are going to do, what we are doing, is using storytelling to raise the awareness about dolphins and whales there. So it's like we had workshops of storytelling on the boat, which was amazing. We had like 80 dolphins, I think, hanging around with us. Then we had also singing on the boat, which was even more, that was really beyond. So many whales came and they just stayed and listened, and it seemed like they're really cooperating. And it was huge, not only for all of us being there, but also for the team, like of people running the boats and also doing, working with tourists, because it was like a small switch in their consciousness that there is something more. They are not just there doing their own thing. No, they are aware, they have consciousness, they do listen, and they do want to communicate if we open up to it. So it was really a big experience. And this year we are doing it again. And again, there will be workshops on storytelling. We will have, again, storytellers we will invite, so that we will have storytelling evenings on whales and dolphins. Again, also on the boats and on the land. We would also like to cooperate with schools and to educate local children about the importance of whales and dolphins. So this all is now a planning in progress, but it will be again in April next in Tenerife.
Wonderful. Will you be sharing the information about how people can register, or is it already booked up? It sounds like a wonderful.
It hasn't been published, but I'm guessing after the last year's experience that it will be quite fast. But I will surely be happy to share it and tell you about it.
Send information to Feast.
I will.
We have just a few minutes. If there are questions that people would like to ask of the tellers, you can put them in the chat. I hope that Feast will be sharing the chat as well as sharing the recording, because the comments have been beautiful. I've been looking out of the corner of my eye to see the insights and the reactions that people have generously shared in the chat line. Let's see, I don't see any questions yet, but I have been very happy to hear the range of stories, from ancient folk tales and fables to all the way through modern factual stories, and all the way through to seeing the way that young people can adapt the genre of fantasy folk tales to tell an important modern story. It's wonderful to see how storytelling is being kept alive, being passed on, and how these many genres can be used in environmental storytelling in different ways and in so many different places. Oh, no questions yet? My goodness. Well, I want to thank all of the storytellers that I have had the privilege of working with and getting to know. The stories that we practiced in our group mentoring sessions, some of them came to the showcase, and others were stories. Oh, I see. Spela has a helper as well. And some of the stories are stories that the other members of the group didn't hear in our group sessions, because they worked privately with me to develop these, and Cassandra worked with some other colleagues to develop that story. So I was hearing Cassandra's story for the first time, and it was beautiful.
Well, I just wanted to say a huge thanks to Fran and Feast, because it's been really, the mentorship's just been, it's been great meeting everybody else, but also just, I've been doing this a long time and I got in a bit of a rut, and I wanted to give myself some fresh thinking, and it's done that. So thank you to Feast and for Fran for guiding us. Feast for giving us the opportunity, and Fran for guiding us. Thank you.
I want to mention that if you want to hear more environmental stories, that the Environmental Storytelling Special Interest Group, the ECO-SIG in the NSN, the American National Storytelling Network, is going to be sponsoring a telebration November 14th, I believe. It will be free, though we would welcome donations to help with the work of the SIG, and I'll share information about that. I'll be one of those tellers, and a number of other people from the ECO-SIG will be telling stories then, so you can hear some more stories. What we've heard this evening, this morning, depending on where you are, has been a very rich and wonderful variety, very inspiring, very touching, and very informative in all ways. Well, here we are, wrapping up in a nice 90 minutes. I'm so glad for all of the stories that we got to hear. I'm always impressed with what people are doing, with the work that they're doing, the way that they're using storytelling. It is exciting and inspiring, and it gives me hope for the future, that we are going to move to a constructive solution to this mess that we and the rest of our invasive species have perpetrated on our mother, the earth. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Feast for making this possible.
Thank you, Fran. It's been a pleasure and an honor being with you, and to all the mentees as well. I know we'll all agree on this. I think you've just attending those sessions with you and with each other has changed us, and that is a good thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And good evening, or have a good day, depending on where you are on this round, round earth.